I love Stargate SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis. So much so that I have seen just as much Stargate as I have Star Trek. Now that being said, as a watcher of the Stargate universe, not that show, I didn't really like that show, but as a watcher of the Stargate canon, right, there were certain storylines that I had thought to myself were so familiar, right? Like, where have I seen this story before? Because it's something that I came to realize, and that is that most of the writers who used to write for Star Trek decided to go moonlight and write for Stargate. And they decided to use some of the stories that they had written before and just put a little bit of tweaks and little different outcomes and different happenstances. But anybody who is a fan of both will know, oh man, you can't hide that from me. Now, I figured I would gather from memory, man, just some of the episodes that I could recall that I was like, nah, nah, nah. Y'all jacked that story from Star Trek. Y'all didn't jack that story. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some stories that I missed. Like I said, it's just from memory. But if I've missed any, man, and you guys know of some that y'all was like, oh, yeah, that one was Jack from Star Trek too, go ahead and put it in the comments. Because as you know, if you jacking stories from Star Trek during its heyday, you're going to have a very successful show. And we all know how successful and how long SG-1 stayed on air. So let's talk about a few of them. So in Stargate season one, I believe it was episode 18, right? They had this episode called Tin Man. Now, I'm not going to relate it to the episode Tin Man from The Next Generation because they have absolutely nothing in common besides their name. But what they do have in common is that in the episode Tin Man, right, you had this guy who put the consciousnesses of the SG1 team into basically perfect looking androids, right? So much so that the consciousness inside these androids thought that they were the real SG1 team. Now, that reminded me of a little episode called What Are Little Girls Made Of from Star Trek, the original series. Yes, it dealt with people getting their consciousness willingly and unwillingly put into the bodies of perfect immortal androids. Or we talk about the episode Bane, SG1. I believe it was from season 2, episode 18, right? Basically, this alien life form insect thing almost stings Tilk, right? And Tilk has to suffer with the ramifications of that poison and it turning him different. So as I was looking at that episode, I was thinking to myself, hey man, is this Operation Annihilate where Spock got stung by that thing, man, on that planet, that same planet that was responsible for the colonists, including Captain James T. Kirk's brother, uh, all finding meeting their end? Is that kind of like Operation Annihilate? But then you have the episode The Fifth Race, SG1, Season 2, Episode 15. What's going on in this is that Colonel O'Neill encounters this piece of technology that downloads the entirety of the ancient's knowledge into his brain. He starts to evolve certain abilities, man, gets super smart. And then I start thinking to myself, man, the nth degree, Star Trek, The Next Generation, which focuses basically on the same thing, except it happens to Lieutenant Barclay. It's weird, right? Serpent's Song, Season 2, Episode 18 of Stargate. Basically, one of the most badass villains of the Stargate universe was his name, Apophis. He basically ends up being on the run from the other system lords, man, losing his all his power as system lord, and he goes into the hands of the SG1 team where they choose to protect them. Does that remind you of a certain entity that found its way aboard the USS Enterprise D, right, for protection from the Calamarain? What was the episode? Q Who? Nah, it was Deja Q. That's what it was. I always get those two episodes mixed up. I don't know why, but it was Deja Q. Stargate Season 2, Episode 17, right? I think it was called Holiday. Basically the team comes across this guy, right, who decides to switch bodies with Daniel Jackson, right, and put Daniel Jackson inside his body, and the team got to figure out who's telling the truth. And this dude's mission is to continue what he has, which is basically a war against the Goa'uld. That reminded me of the episode from the original series called Turnabout Intruder, right? Where this lady who has a gripe against Captain Kirk ends up switching bodies with him so that she could continue her mission as captain of the Enterprise because they wasn't letting women become Captain Enterprise. And I guess Kirk had broke her heart a while back. Season 2, Episode 21 of Stargate called 1969, one of my favorite SG1 episodes. Anyway, what's going on in this episode is, right, General Hammond gives Carter this letter, right, says, hey, don't open it till you get to the other side of this Stargate. Anyway, come to find out, they travel back in time to 1969, where they end up meeting a young George Hammond, who ends up helping them escape and get back to their own time period. I figured that that reminded me of the Next Generation episode, Time's Arrow, where instead of it being General Hammond, it was Guinan, and Guinan had already met them before when they had went back in time, and she helped them in a mission and got them back to the proper time period. Man, you gotta love it. Out of Mind, Season 2, Episode 22 of Stargate SG-1. What's going on in this, man, is that Colonel O'Neill is awakened, man, and I guess like the future, like 80 years in the future, where they trying to explain to him, man, that he had gotten into this accident, and now he's in the future, and he has to deal with this sickness and rejuvenate into what's going on. But is it a big facade mystery? Is it a trap? What's going on in this? So that reminded me of the episode that happened the same way with Commander Riker. It was called Future Imperfect, where this little kid had basically did the same thing to Commander Riker, where he was now thinking he was the captain of the Enterprise with Data as his first officer. Man, I'm telling you, these writers, man, they at least try to hide it a little bit. The episode Show and Tell, SG1, what was it, Season 2, Episode 20. What's going on in this, man? You got this little dude come through the Stargate, man, and he tries to tell them, hey, my mom, who they think is some type of imaginary friend, is giving me this information that y'all about to be attacked and everything like this. Come to find out, the imaginary friend, which, well, the imaginary mom is actually a real being that they just can't see. Look, this reminds me so much of the episode Imaginary Friend from Star Trek The Next Generation, where basically the same thing was going on, man. You got this entity that took the form of this little girl so he could be the imaginary friend of this other little girl and start wreaking havoc aboard the ship. Look, I love it. You could go into how the replicators and the Borg have so many similarities. So much so that I actually wouldn't know who would win in a fight between the Borg and the replicators. Like, that would be an interesting confrontation. Hell, the replicators even went so far as to make a Replicam, basically, or I like to call Stargate's version of Locutus. Let's not even get into the Jaffa, the Tok'ra, and the Trill. Because in the SG1 movie, the Goa'uld didn't look like little larvae that went inside pouches in people's stomach. That happened after that Next Generation episode where Dr. Crusher fell in love with that Trill ambassador dude. And let's not forget how they decided to put warp travel and transwarp in Stargate universe when you have literal gates that you can walk through, and that is the name of your show. Why have warp travel and starships and stuff like that? Look, it's just weird. But those are just some of the similarities that I could just think of, right? And just to think, it is so many more similarities between the storylines and story characters and species. You think about, for instance, the Nox and the Arganians. All right, think about that whole situation. Think about, what was it, the episode The Nox in SG1, where they go to this planet, right, and they meet this like seemingly prehistoric and super peaceful species that's out there just in the woods, and Apothos is coming, and they think that Apothos is going to enslave everybody and kill everybody, and they trying to save the Nox and everything. And Nox like, look, man, we all right, we all right. Now they went right into the episode Errand of Mercy, man, with the Organians, where the Kirk and Spock beam down to this seemingly peaceful planet with all like these prehistoric and super pre-warp species, man. Come to find out, these dudes could snap their fingers, man, and stop a whole battle between between Starfleet and the Klingons in space. Like, so when you have similarities like that, it's just real hard to kind of overlook. Anyway, I didn't want this to be a super long video. I'm interested to see what similarities in Stargate and Star Trek that you guys come up with. I'm interested to see in your comments. But leave your comments below. Ring the bell for any future content. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And as always, peace, recycle, and save the whales. You guys be cool.